In this video, it's going to be me, another agent, and another agent explain how to sell 50 policies or more in 30 days as a life insurance agent. Now, the cool thing is that I've sold 50 policies or more in over 30 days, and I'm going to share with you what I've learned. A second agent, his name is Brian, last month sold 52 policies and wrote $49,608 in premium, selling over 50 policies in 30 days. And our third agent, Blaze, sold 50 policies exactly, which is over $52,000 of annual premium. And we are going to share with you exactly from 3 different perspectives everything that you need to know to sell 50 policies or more in a month, and we're going to go ahead and discuss it all in a roundtable. So go ahead and watch us together, and hopefully you get a ton of value. Let's jump in.
Start bringing you in here. What is, if you had 3, I messaged you guys, what are 3 ingredients? What do you think the number one ingredient to selling 50 policies in a month? Whether it's like, if I asked you, Blaze, what is one of the reasons why you sold 50 policies in a month, what would you say?
Hands down, number one thing is going to be work ethic. I mean, you could be the most talented individual on the field, but if you don't show up for practice, if you don't show up to your games, it's just going to go unnoticed. And so for me, you're going to have to push yourself. You're going to have to stay late. And of course, there's going to be days you get out early, but if you don't make a deal, I mean, you should have that competitive integrity and to challenge yourself and stay late to get that deal. So for me, I would say it's work ethic.
Yeah.
And I wrote down this quote by Stephen King. Talent is cheaper than table salt. What separates the talented individual from the successful one is a lot of hard work. So for me, you need to be able to outwork yourself, challenge yourself, challenge your goals, try to do better than you did the week before. Even if the week before you hit a monumental stride, you got 15 deals. I mean, you should want to try to come in the week after and try to do more than that.
Absolutely.
So pushing yourself, I think, would be good.
Yeah, that hard work and the grit. And that's one thing that you guys both have in common that I've noticed too. It's like, I don't know if you guys fed off each other last month, but you were always typically the first one here and then always showing up late. And then if you don't get your goals, you're going to go ahead and show up on Saturdays. When it comes to like some of the best weeks that you had last week, like Blaze, anything kind of, what was the most deals that you sold last month in a full week? Anything kind of come to mind?
I think it was 16.
16. Brian, what was your like weekly goal? Like weekly?
I think it was around the same. I think I had 16 around there.
Cool. And when you're talking about, Brian, the 15 or 16 deals in a week, Blaze talks about ingredient number 1. What would you say your number 1 ingredient is that you would need to sell 50 policies in a month to be a top agent?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to kind of like, obviously, that work ethic. That's always number 1. I preached that in the previous videos that I've been with you in the interviews. That and also I think the other thing that we truly only have control over at the end of the day is our mindset. So guarding your mindset, and that to me intertwines with work ethic, because throughout the day I'm making these dials, I'm going in, but I'm also educating myself. I'm maximizing my time when I'm here. I'm learning, I'm listening to my calls, I'm trying to troubleshoot my areas of improvement, my strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Right. And I kind of relate it to dance. A professional dancer, you can always tell that they're a professional dancer by their basic. Their basics will always stand out from somebody who's a beginner. Right. And that ultimately relates to the sales process that we have here, or me being a life insurance agent. How are my basics? Right. The basics is work ethic. The basics is mindset for me. Two things there. Right. And being able to guard your mindset every single day, regardless of the results, is what's kept me afloat and consistent. And by also, like I said, feeding myself positive things throughout the day, and also keeping myself distracted from the negativity, because you're going to have tough weeks, right? This past week, I was struggling. I was on the struggle bus, and it wasn't necessarily my fault. Just I guess you could say the cards were dealt in that fashion, in the sense of it wasn't a 15 policy week, and that's okay. I still hit my 8, right? And the numbers always end up adding up, but being able to guard your mindset in the process of having a killer work ethic are the 2 main things that I feel like is what elevates you to be a very consistent, high-performing sales agent. And by guarding your mindset and doing these things, consistently wanting to learn, being hungry, being humble, being acceptable to being coached when your sales manager or somebody that you trust can give you feedback so that you can implement it, is always something that is helpful. Because even though I've been doing this for 6 months now, that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. I still make mistakes. and I still intertwine to having tiny, tiny, maybe bad habits that I implemented into the script, and I don't even notice because I'm so used to the mundane things of every single day of doing it. So it's always nice to have someone that you can trust. Also, in this case, we have a specific sales manager that we're assigned to that can coach us and be like, hey, you sounded a little off here, or you maybe added too much fluff here, or you maybe did this. And then you, as the agent, can analyze that and be like, okay, you know what? He or she's right. Let me take that off. Let me add that on. And ultimately, right, that'll help you stay consistent too, on track with your goals, right? And so
Absolutely.
I would say
Yeah.
mindset.
The mindset of just the grit of the rejection. So we have Blaze, we have that hard work also combined with that mindset of dealing with rejection and moving forward. Going back to you, Blaze, when it comes to like your second ingredient, if I don't know if you've already mentioned what Brian's mentioned, but if you had to also add your second ingredient to what makes a really, really successful agent, what would you kind of put in your chef's blend?
I think emotional intelligence during the sales process.
So good.
I mean, with telesales, there's no body language. I can't see you. I can't, really be in the room with you. But I think knowing what to say, in terms of like mirroring back what they tell you, how to say it, your tonality, whether it needs to be a concerning tone or a worried tone or something like that, and then when to say it. And I think that drives into the process of your sales. Whether we're in a discovery, whether we're, deep diving into their pain. I think those are important things as well into the process.
That's so good. So my 3 ingredients, number 1 ingredient, I put, you need the right person with the right character traits. And those 3 character traits are hungry. So Blaze, you literally started off with that, hunger. Secondly was coachability, or like grit. So that means us being able to coach, listen. Brian, you're doing this. You're studying your sales calls. You're thinking about how you can become better. You're always looking for feedback. You have no ego. And the third, I swear I wrote this down, emotional intelligence. And that's exactly word for word what you said. Having that understanding of like, when Miss Betty's going through a tough day, you can kind of sense it, and understanding how you can adapt your tonality to kind of comfort her. So
absolutely,
it's not a coincidence that you guys have brought this up. When it comes to like another ingredient, I don't know if either of you guys want to share. So we kind of have the right person, character traits that the person has to have. How about like when it comes to like systems or any other ingredients that you would say would be a necessity to be someone who can sell 50 policies? Anything else kind of come to mind?
Yeah, I think that, for YouTube land, you see other videos of high performing agents with other agencies hitting high metrics. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, metrics are just a beauty vanity at the end of the day. If you're not writing good business, right? Writing 60,000 AP in a month doesn't mean anything if your placement is trash. I'm just going to say that, be blunt about it, right? So I think what goes hand in hand with having a high consistent placement rate, or I'm sorry, putting up on the board the AP that you submit, is also understanding the kind of business that you're writing, right? And that's one of the things that we've consistently been taught here, right? One of the things that I hold myself accountable to is, for example, and this has nothing to do with the client, for the record, right? If I'm talking to a client and I'm on the phone and they tell me, that their budget, they can't go over $45, to me, personally, from what I know and what I've experienced firsthand, I'm doing them a disservice. The reason why I say that is because statistically speaking, those kind of policies don't ever place. So by me putting that effort and pouring into that client, and at the end of the day, it's going to come back and be a chargeback, or essentially I'm adding on a bill that they can't afford to actually keep, I'm doing them a disservice for them, for myself, and ultimately for the agency that I represent. So understanding that you always want to actually serve the client ethically and also write good business. Because there's no point in having, 49,000 AP if at the end of the day I had a 50% placement rate, as an example. I'm not saying that's the case here, but what I do mean by that is staying away from things that that could potentially end up affecting that. Because at the end of the day, you're not doing them a favor, right? Also, right, sticking to your guns as far as not writing direct express business. And that's one of the things that we've been taught here. Nothing against the client, once again, but the numbers do show. There are literally insurance companies that won't even take card business, right? And I can guarantee you it's because of that fact, right? Is that it doesn't place, it causes more of a headache for the agent, the customer service team that we have here, the actual insurance company that we wrote the policy with. So it ends up causing a bigger problem in itself. So I personally, I can count on my fingers the times that I've written Direct Express, right? Simply because at the end of the day, it's not good business to write, right? Also, another thing is sticking to the core four that you guys call it, that we've embraced here as well. In other words, knowing what good business is, that 45 and over, having a good understanding of what our premium should be, what we should be aiming for, to be able to solve the client's problem first and foremost, but also have the client actually commit to this actual policy, so that at the end of the day, when they pass away, this is actually going to be there for their family, right? So knowing what good business is, and ultimately having a duplicatable sales process, having a really good script, right? And knowing at this point for me, knowing when to say certain things that I add, little things. I don't make the script 100 pages long, but little jokes here and there, kind of like what's to feed off Blaze's emotional intelligence comment there, knowing when to say these things with a certain client. If I'm talking to Military Joe, I'm not going to be like, well, this is a rude question to ask a guy here, Mr. Joe, but what's a good height and weight for you? No. But if it's sweet old Miss Betty that I'm on the phone with and we're having a blast, I've already built a good rapport. Yeah, I'm gonna throw that in there, right? Or just having little jokes here in the script that I already have and duplicating that every single time to get the result that I'm essentially looking for. So at least that's what's helped me.
Absolutely. When it comes to the good business too, that's a huge point, because I would say your guys' business is probably better than, I see videos 80,000. You just the placement rate's a huge issue. So making sure that you are submitting the best business. Blaze, anything that you look for, any like red flags to watch out for when it comes to um, making sure you're not submitting bad business?
I'm really, just to save us some time, I would really echo what Ryan said. I mean, he pretty much hit it on the head with everything he said. I mean, you need to have a good you need to have a good premium. You need to be solving an issue, I think, is the biggest thing. If they don't have something that needs to be solved, that's a red flag right there. If they're not opening up and telling you what they need this for, I wouldn't manufacture their own pain. I mean, because ultimately that's going to lead to someone having a lapse policy or even canceling on you. I mean, so I think that's the biggest thing. And everything Brian said was really just straight on, for sure.
Yeah, I noticed there was many times last month where you had people who are like right there on the finish line, Blaze, and same thing for you too, Brian. It's like people were right there on the finish line, and I think this is one of the most valuable skills to have in sales. Is just like helping them overcome or get out of their own way. Blaze, can you kind of touch on that? How that helps you last month, like become a top agent? I think this is really what separates you from doing like 35 policies to 55, 50 policies.
And reiterate that question one more time.
How do you help people who are like who know that need life insurance but are too scared to buy it? Like I feel like that is what separates people from being a top agent or not, is they're right there on that finish line, Blaze, but it's your job as the agent to help them make that final decision.
I think this really dives back into the second ingredient for being a successful agent is the emotional intelligence. I can't teach you what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. But when they're right there on the cusp of the finish line, you really need to just take their hand and ask the proper questions. That's going to get them to cross with you. I've had people want to procrastinate, want to think about it. And then you take that pain that you built during the sales process of why they need it. My gosh, Peter, I know how much this meant to you when we were talking about your father passing and your mom having to cover that. I mean, is that really something you want to put your wife in that position? When they're wanting to think about it, and that really gets them to be like, you know what, you're right. I've been procrastinating for months, weeks. Sometimes I've even heard years. And so you need to be a professional. And when you do that job correctly, they're going to feel comfortable moving forward with you. It's not that they don't need it. It's that everyone else that they've spoken to in the past didn't phrase it or make it of such importance, or their skill wasn't high enough. That's what I would say.
That's so good.
That's what I would tell somebody.
Yeah, man, that's huge. I feel like that's where you guys both are really good. It's like when you hear that first and you think about it, you're like, you're not even sweating. You're like, okay, cool, I got this, right? Where I think an unskilled agent is going to be like, okay, they kind of start getting nervous and they can't handle those finish line objections.
And sorry.
Yeah, right on.
For me, I think I know yesterday you messaged me for speaking out to try to help an agent yesterday. And I think a lot of times in this business, or at least from what I've seen recently in this industry for new agents, is that you see them put in so much work, get so close to the finish line, and then let go and then just give up, whether it be a difficult sale, someone's giving you multiple objections, and you just don't feel like handling it, or there's a lot of pain you gotta unravel. For me, you gotta be willing to just go the extra steps to get that person to take care of what you know they need. So I think that goes back into also the first ingredient, just work ethic. Sometimes you're going to be on a 2-hour long phone call. Sometimes you might have a phone call that's 40 minutes. I mean, it just depends on the person. But I hope that kind of answered it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. It's like, and you guys probably feel like, oh, no way. I've spent an hour and 50 minutes with this person. They are not getting off the phone without a sale. Like, they're giving you some BS objection. And how many times as a top closer, you're like, I don't care. I ain't taking that. We're doing this, because you spent so much time with them. Brian, how would you tell someone to develop that grit? Because you kind of have to get uncomfortable with objections. You got to kind of get uncomfortable with like pushing them. That's a skill that you have to learn. How would you say, how do you get comfortable with being in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Peter. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And if you're not willing to do that, then this line of work probably isn't for you, period. Right? Because you have to be able to develop that skill. And it is a skill, right? Because not everybody can ask at the end of the day, if you pass away, what's that going to look like with your family or for your family, as an example, right? Or when you're at the finish line, you call it the red zone, right? When you're right there, we're at the 1 yard line. We're just literally there, being able to push through, and ultimately realize that this is a one call close kind of business, right? We're not here to reschedule them, right? We're here to talk to them, provide a solution, and ultimately build a relationship building relationship with the client, right? But we're doing it in a one call close. That's the goal here. So you have to have that mindset, and like you said, the way I look at it is, if I'm looking at the time on my phone, if I've been with the client for 45 minutes or 30 minutes or 25 minutes, I'm already at the close. I'm already, about to actually present to them the options that we have here to look at, and they're starting to give me that feeling, right? I'm thinking what you're saying. I'm like, I am not gonna get off the phone with you. I poured too much into. That's how I felt yesterday. Actually, Blaze hit the nail on the head there. I was on the phone with the client for 2.5 hours. Wrote a total of 4 apps, or 3 actually. Somebody came in and helped me because I needed help writing it, but 3 apps. Had to do it 3 times, essentially, right? Helped her out, but I didn't lose it. I wasn't gonna lose her, and I was gonna fight for her, right? Because at the end of the day, when you look at the other side, and I actually experienced this for the first time this past month, when that client passes away is really when it hits home, right? I had my first client pass away, and I got notified last week or 2 weeks ago, and to me it was like, wow, I am providing a service to these people, but I have to fight for them when I'm on the phone. There may be other agents out there, kind of like Blaze said, that they've spoken to, and that's where that emotional intelligence comes into play. You look for those signs when you're on the phone. If they told you that they've talked to multiple people, you kind of want to dig deeper. What's kind of been holding you back? I mean, it sounds like this is pretty important to you here, right? So you start to dig deeper and deeper, and then once you start to get their understanding, this is when you start to actually realize, okay, I need to take them to the finish line, right? It has to be me, and do everything in your power, right? If you've done everything in your power to do that in the close, then be okay at the end of the day if you weren't able to close them, because not everybody's closable at the end of the day, right? That's okay. But what I will say is, you need to have some sort of actual structure and training, and that's where you guys come into play. We're trained on how to handle certain situations. If it's a spouse objection, how to isolate that, what to say, when to say it, how to come across as an advisor when you're in the close, and not somebody who's grabbing them and forcefully taking them to this place. If anything, you're suggesting it. You're giving them the hand. They're right there, and as soon as they give you the hand, you bring them across the finish line.
Right.
So we have a really good structure on how we do that here, to have that understanding of, okay, if it's a spouse objection, this is what you do. If it's a I need to think about it objection, this is what you do. If it's a I'm shopping around objection, this is the approach that you take. And then from there, you accommodate to the client, say it in a fashion to where they're not going to be defensive, ultimately be receptive to what you're saying, so that when you actually give that suggestion, when you actually close them, right, you are actually going to get them across the finish line. And that's a good feeling. I'm not gonna lie
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, it's the best
When
feeling.
when you're there and you got the adrenaline rush and you're like right there with them, you're trying to keep your composure because you have to, right? And then you're like in that process of getting into the application, and then finally you're like, okay, we got past that. We got past the social part of the application. We got past the banking part of it. Then at that point, it's like this is a wrap, right? But you gotta love the process, man. It's just best yet said. Like I'm smiling. I mean, I'm smiling because
Right.
you gotta love the grind, man. You gotta love
Yeah.
it. You gotta love the grind. And to me, that's
So
what
good.
makes Blaze and I and anybody else that's coming into Legacy that are starting to become high performing agents as well. You just gotta love it, man. You gotta love it. I know it's weird. I may sound a little like crazy, if you
Crazy.
will, but you gotta love it. You gotta love getting beat up in the sense of like being stubborn.
Mhm.
Like, oh my gosh, I got beat up. Like I'm on my seventh presentation or whatever, and it's just not coming through. I haven't found the right client. You gotta keep hitting that dial button, man, because
Yep.
it will
Absolutely.
pan out. It
I
will.
thought you were gonna jump in there, Blaze. Okay, cool. And
Yeah,
then
no.
if I was gonna say like, okay, thinking of like, okay, let's say someone if someone's at 20 policies for the month, or at 50 policies per month, and you had to just like only explain one word what they're missing, what would you say it would be? And Brian, you can start us off. So the reason that this person did not sell 40 policies and they only sold 20 policy is probably because blank
Drive.
I would say activity.
activity. So
That's
activity.
I would say that's the first thing for sure. Now I can't speak for outside of here because independent agents have to buy their own leads. So I'm
Sure.
sure there's that underlining factor of I have to buy these leads and I'm like scared to commit to that. But then what ends up happening is you actually end up being the client. You end up being the client psychologically speaking. You're scared to make that commitment, right?
Hmm.
You're scared to bet on yourself. So I would say definitely the first thing that
Hmm.
comes to my mind is activity, right? Because
Activity.
it is essentially a numbers game in sense of once you understand your sales process and your strengths and weaknesses as an individual, you can kind of troubleshoot where you're at, and essentially if you didn't hit 40K, you need to put in more dials, you need to put in more presentations. The more presentations you put in, the more chances you're going to have at the bat to swing and actually hit a home run and close the client. So to
Yeah.
me, the first thing that comes to my head is activity.
Activity. And then
Yeah.
Blaze, you were talking about similar, the drive.
Yeah, I said drive, but I mean really that goes hand in hand with
Absolutely.
activity. I don't know much about outside of our LFL, but there's no reason that you can't hit more than 20 policies. That's just my train of thought. That's my mindset. I feel like if you can't do more than 20, then it's not that you're not made for this, but you don't want it bad enough. You don't
That's so
you
good.
don't want to succeed more than where you're at. You're comfortable. You're complacent. And for
Mm.
me, I'm never comfortable with complacency. I will come in every day to make sure that I do more than I did yesterday, that I did more than I did last week, and ultimately did more than I did in last month. So for me, to those agents out here who are struggling, I ask you to just really look yourself in the mirror and ask, are you really pushing yourself to your maximum? Are you doing the most with the time that is available to you? And are you also taking care of yourself? And this is important too. Are you taking care of yourself outside of work? For me, are you reading? Are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? Are you working out? For me, those things are important. And Peter, I know you have recently throw you in the spotlight. You've been taking up your fitness game, and
Yeah.
I would like to hear how that's helped you as a business owner. How's that
Absolutely.
changed your mindset? And would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the habits. I was just speaking to Isaiah before this, and he's a top dog. He sold
Mm,
30 policies in his first 20 days or whatever, something crazy,
that's good.
32. And he mentioned that too. It's his activities, and for me, it's my daily life outside of work. It's the same routine. So I get up at the same time, pretty much eat the same, do the same, move my
Right.
body every single day, because I need that in order to have like, an experiment. If you have a controlled environment, then you can typically, and you got the results that you want, you just kind of have to kind of just do the same thing again. And that's been crucial for me.
For sure.
Working out, why I do it is because it's like my de-stress for the time. It's like I don't really do it. I'm at the place now in the business where when I'm at the gym, I'm thinking about the business. So I'm not really going to the gym to like, my goal is not to get so
Yeah.
swole. My goal is just to decompress and to just move my body because it makes me feel good. So um, I love how everyone incorporates that. Brian, it's with your dance, that's your activity. It's Blaze, it's with your, fitness journey too. So that constant growth of this leveling up just makes a huge impact.
It does.
And I might add, Peter, if you don't
Yeah.
mind, I might add there the kind of like Blaze says, if you're an agent listening to this and let's say you're at the 20K mark, look at yourself in the mirror. Everything that we just talked about, taking that into consideration, right? Outside of your dial time when you're dialing, and also, right, it's not so much the fact that you're not capable, it's a lack of skill. And part of the activity comes from you training, learning, listening to your calls, because there's an analogy there that I think about when I think about that. Somebody who's at 20 who wants to be at 40 or more, whatever the case may be, is you can spend all day chopping down a tree with an axe, right? And eventually the tree's going to come down, right? Or you can spend most of that day refining that axe itself, sharpening it, so that essentially you can get it down in 10 chops,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like at the beginning of this, when you have no experience, you got to go at it. You got to get the reps in.
Yep.
But there will come a point in time where that effort that you're putting in starts to translate into your process and your skill. How can I actually level up so that instead of making $500 a day, I can start to bring it down to 400, to 300, to 200, to get to a point where it's like if I have a good amount of lead flows, I can have the same results, if not better, within 100 dials or less.
Sure.
So start focusing on actually sharpening the axe so
Mhm.
that when you actually get to the tree, in other words, you get to the client, right, you have a better skill set so that you can actually close them more efficiently. You still have the same work ethic. It's just that now your efforts are more focused on this instead of this eventually. So for an agent
Absolutely.
that's been doing this for a while now, I would start to translate that effort into how can I actually become a better agent instead of how can I just dial away. Because I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if we had the choice, right? Ideally, you would want to make less than $100 a day for outbound at least, and
Yeah.
have two, three, four sales. That'd be beautiful on a daily basis. Now that's not the case. That's not always
Yeah.
going to happen. But having that same mindset and grit and willingness to do that can be applied to anything in your whole process of what it is to be successful in this industry. Like you guys said, what are you doing outside of it? What are you doing inside of it? Like having some sort of structure for you to actually stick to so that ultimately you can be consistent in the long run and refining that skill.
Yeah. I wrote that down because we were kind of tying it all together. I said skill. I wrote this down. Skill comes from sacrifice, and in order to get the skill, you must give up something. And all of you guys gave up something because you guys all didn't come in here with a level 10 skill set. So you had to give up probably like family time. You probably had to give up like dance time. You probably had to give up, social time. You probably had to give up all these extra times with the family to get the skill that can now unlock, future potential growth, income, things like that. But the problem is a lot of people want 50 policies but aren't willing to sacrifice anything. And that's I think really where it all kind of stems from. Any final ingredients that you guys would add into the mix that would really just shape the perfect agent to hit their 50 policies in a month? Anything that we haven't touched on?
I mean, I would say I think like with anything in life, right? You think about the greats in sports, right? Michael Jordan, Kobe, or outside of sports, just anybody that's accomplished anything big in life. You have to be obsessed with it, and you can't be balanced. I mean, that's just the reality of it, especially when you're first starting off, right? And in order to be a high producing agent, whether it's here or anywhere else, that's just the nature of the beast. You have to be okay with sacrificing something. For
Mhm.
me, it's been family time and especially dance. I haven't been able to be as consistent as much as I've wanted to be, but that's okay because I know that this is something that I've had to do to become successful and consistently successful.
Yeah.
Now I'm at a point where I am slowly getting back to that balance, right? But always maintaining that focus in the sense of I will do what it takes to be able to hit my goals so that I can ultimately provide for myself and my family and whatnot, right? But being okay with that because in order to achieve anything great, if you want to be above average, you have to do above average things,
Mhm.
right? You have to be willing to get up early. You have to be willing to study late. You have to be willing to maximize your time while you're dialing if you can, depending on whatever system you guys have. But ultimately, just having that mindset and also understanding that it takes time. You can't be at
Absolutely.
50, you can't be at 40,000 if you've only been doing this for a month, right? And having realistic expectations and setting yourself realistic goals to
Mhm.
achieve so that you can slowly but surely start to get to those numbers, right? And not being so focused on the vanity metric. Because what was the saying that we said this past week? Placement is, what is it?
Oh,
The
Jess came up with, yeah.
yeah, what
About the
the
bills, something about paying the bills.
placement for dough or something like that.
Oh yeah, leaderboard for show,
There you
placement
go.
for dough.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it. Leaderboard is for show, placement is for dough.
Jess W, yeah, give Jess the credit there. Yeah,
That's awesome.
that's
and
funny.
that to me, that's so true because if you get so caught up with like, oh my gosh, I see Blaze, he's hitting 40,000. I need to be Blaze. Well, hey, I'm not Blaze, man. I'm Brian. So, well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna listen to Blaze's calls because obviously he's cooking up something that I can learn, right?
Yeah.
Implement that in my process and make it my own because at the end of the day, I'm not Blaze. I can't compare myself to Blaze. I'm not gonna compare myself to you, Peter. Like
Mhm.
you've crushed it since you've been in this industry. I mean, we look up to you obviously, but at the end of the day, I'm not you. But what I do want to do is be a resemblance of you to an extent,
Sure.
right? To the sense of that kind of success that you've had, and by doing so, I've done that in the sense of studying you. I still look at your videos on YouTube, man, to this day. Anytime that you post, I'm like, I'm
Yeah,
watching
same.
it because there's always something to learn. Like now that I understand what you're doing, now that I'm actually in this, I understand the process of what we do.
Yeah.
I have a better. Oh my gosh, that's why he says that.
Perspective.
Why that's why he does it like that. And it all comes back together. So
Yeah.
just being humble, right? Being humble and grounded, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you've hit 20, 30, 40, 50. What really matters is you being humble and being willing to consistently grow and learn. Because the day that you shut that off, the day that you're not willing to learn is the day that essentially you start to go downhill.
Yeah, lose progress. Absolutely.
And so that's how I see it.
Dude, this was pretty awesome. Anybody's anything you have to add in regards to lessons or things that you've learned that have helped you get here?
Honestly, as much as I would love to say something, I feel like we've really cleared everything that's helped me. I mean,
Yeah.
we've hit everything. I mean, if another agent who's either starting off or has been in this industry and is having troubles, I think if you really take everything that Brian said, I've said, Peter said, and implement that into your life, into your sales process, I would be highly doubtful that you don't do better than you're doing now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys sharing. For my three, I'll end with my three, and you guys can give me any feedback. So,
Okay.
my three for the 50 policies, the three ingredients I put down was number one, the right person with the right character traits, hungry, coachable, and then emotional intelligent. I put a reliable lead source because that was one of the things that I needed to hit my consistent goals as a reliable lead source. And then three is 100% focus on sales. I think what gives you guys the competitive edge is that you don't have to worry about, I think there's people that have same skill sets out there, but they don't have their full hours and days devoted to sales. It's customer service, it's recruiting, it's changing my marketing system, it's following up with clients. And I think if they just focus 100% on selling, that they could get and hit their goals. So that was my three. Any feedback for me?
Yeah, it's like Blaze said, we have the blessing to not have to pay for our own leads and deal with our own customer care work, right? That's a huge blessing in itself. So for an independent agent who has to actually deal with that, I would agree. Your selling is the bread and butter, right? If you're not putting deals on the board in the sense of trying to actually have clients come in to build your book of business, there's no sense in doing anything else. So yeah, if you have a good reliable lead source that that you trust, that's consistent, buy those leads, man, and get at it. Especially when you first start off, is how I would look at it, and eventually start figuring things out in terms of like how can I start to build systems in place to where I can efficiently have my customer care work, balance out, right? And that may look like a different series, so having some sort of series of drip text, sorry, kind of like we have here, right? Something to where it's automated. Start automating your systems so that eventually you can focus more on selling. And hey, if your goal is to grow an agency at that point, then cool, you're gonna have to build bigger systems at that point. But what I will say is starting to efficiently start having these things in place, but focus on one thing at a time. I feel like as humans, we tend to do that a lot. We have squirrel moments. We're like, we're going to try this. This doesn't work. Okay, now we're going to go this way. Okay, that didn't work. Now we're going to go this way. I'm going to try final expense. Now I'm going to try IULs. Now I'm going to try mortgage protection. Stick to one thing. If it's one thing that I learned from you, Peter, I think I watched a video a long time ago. It was like, this is what I want to specialize. This is what I do. This is Peter Roberts. This is, if you want to learn how to do final expense, learn from me, right? And stick to it. Have one window. Don't look anywhere else. Make that your focus. Master that process. Master that product. Know the underwriting like the back of your hand with the products that you offer the client, right? Because at the end of the day, too, that's one thing that I wanted to mention is we have the same products that other agencies have. We're no different. We don't have a special product that's specifically for legacy family life that these other agencies don't have, right? For the most part, right? A lot of agencies have access to the same products that we have. What makes us different is essentially how we connect with the client. That's it, right? Our process is the only thing that differentiates us. And as an independent agent, that's the thing that differentiates you is your process and how you treat the client and what's going to get them to actually commit to be and do business with you for the long run, not just for the one-time payment, but for the long run. And so that's for me. That's it. What do you think, Blaze?
I agree with that. Actually, I don't remember if I mentioned or not. One of the ingredients I did put down, I put a fourth one, was the ability to connect with the client.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important. Just making them feel like, and just making them feel like they're heard. You understand their position. You understand where they're coming from. Maybe you've even been there before, possibly, with whatever they're going through, and that allows them to really feel comfortable with you and move forward. So again, like Brian said, nothing we're doing, we're selling the same products, but it's the way we sell the product that's much different than probably everyone else is doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you end up selling the guy yesterday who was from Louisiana and moved out of state, and you were talking about like where you're at? Remember him?
Oh, was it his and hers policy?
Yeah, dude, I listened to that call for 2 seconds and you were connecting with him. You were talking about where you're from, the food, and like you had these like outside comments of like, yeah, man, I bet you missed the food here, and you could tell he was opening up, and just that connection was made, and you were treating. It almost felt like you guys were friends, and those people don't care as much about the price. They're like, I like this guy. He knows what he's talking about. Connect with him. I trust him. Like, we'll do it. And I kind of want to do it with you. And I knew it's interesting that turned into a his and her sale.
Yeah.
So
I have them tomorrow, actually.
Nice.
The wife's tomorrow, and the husband was yesterday. But yeah, just connecting with the client, I think that is so important. And yeah.
Right on. Cool. This was fun, guys. 40 minutes of value. I'm excited. Thank you guys for all your contributions and what you're doing and how you're setting a new standard, how you're pushing each other. In a few years, we'll look back and be like, this is why we built a badass team. It's because we have people that are setting the limits and standards, and y'all are rock stars. So I appreciate you jumping in, and I hope it provides a ton of value to everyone.